This is Miss Messages, written by ShadowEtienne and read by Lalaspodfics. Summary. Meng Yao sustained injuries that caused him ongoing problems after the first time he attempted to join the Jin sect. When he accompanies Nie Huaisang to the cloud recesses, Lan Xichen notices the injuries in him, and perhaps this will change the course of Meng Yao's life. And somewhere down the line, the rest of the story. Chapter 1. Arrival. Of all the students and their escorts arriving for the lectures, Lan Xichen had been especially looking forward to the arrival of the Nie contingent. In his last letter, Nie had written that Meng Yao would be accompanying Nie Huaisang with the gifts and to make sure that the younger Nie brother actually arrived at the intended time. Xichen was intensely curious about the newest addition to the Nie sect. Nie talked about Meng Yao in all of his letters at length. Xichen was fairly certain that Meng was interested in courting Meng Yao if he had not already started, and Xichen wanted to meet the person who had captured his friend's interest, especially since Nie Mingjue's letters had almost tripled in length since Meng Yao's arrival in the Unclean Realm. Lan Xichen was not able to greet the Nie contingent when they arrived. There were too many duties for him to attend to in preparation for the young cultivators beginning their studies in the cloud recesses. His first look at Meng Yao was when the slightly younger man brought forward the gift from the Nie sect. He heard the whispering among some of the cultivators who had come to study, and he was quietly furious on Meng Yao's behalf. After all, this was someone that Meng had trusted enough to put in control as his second-in-command and whose head was adorned with the highest level of Nie braids. His origins did not matter, nor did the fact that he was a relatively weak cultivator. He stepped closer than he might have originally intended, studying the other man curiously, and he saw the tiny wince as Meng Yao bowed. He caught Meng Yao's hands, bringing him back up, and he realized that the wince had not just been because of the people talking about him in the background. Meng Yao was favoring his right side somewhat, shifting his weight to put less pressure on it. Xichen had not heard of any past injuries, so he was immediately concerned that Meng Yao had somehow been injured along the way and not said anything so as to not inconvenience the others out of a sense of duty to his role. He would have to look into it. He could see why Nie Mingjue seemed so pleased by Meng Yao, though. He was unfailingly polite, and his voice was pleasant to listen to. There was something about him that instantly made Xichen want to protect the younger man, and his smile only accentuated that. Yes, he decided, Meng Yao would probably suit Nie Mingjue quite well. Chapter 2. An Old Injury. Later, when Meng Yao came to bow to him and tell him goodbye, Lan Xichen caught him again, not wanting him to exacerbate whatever injury had been done to his side. After their initial exchange, he looked concerned and asked, "You're leaving so soon. Have you had your injury seen to yet?" Confusion filled Meng Yao's face, mostly masked by a neutrally polite expression, but evident enough to Xichen. "My injury? I'm not sure what you mean, ShadowEtienne." Xichen's brows drew together. That had not been quite what he had expected, but it would not do for him to send Meng Yao back to Nie Mingjue hurt. Besides, he could stand to get to know his best friend's potential partner better. Leading Meng Yao away from the more frequented areas in case Meng Yao was just keeping face, he said softly, "You were favoring your right side yesterday, and again today. I thought that perhaps you were injured along the way and did not wish to worry Huaisang." Meng Yao stared at him, bafflement clearly overtaking his polite facade. He said dismissively, "It's an old injury. Nothing to worry about. I'm perfectly fine to travel." Xichen frowned lightly and asked, "Has no one seen to it? Even an old injury can be treated so as to not cause you pain. You should not leave just yet. I can see to it and make sure that proper instructions are sent to the physicians in Qinghe if any ongoing treatments are needed. I'm sure that Huaisang would not mind having your presence for a while longer, and Mingjue would not want to see you hurting." He was surprised that Mingjue had somehow missed this, but he also could tell that Meng Yao was doing his best to hide it, and Mingjue was used to harsh physical training that led to many aches and pains. Meng Yao was studying him. "I'm sure I could have it seen to when I return. I would not want to inconvenience Chefeng Zun with my overlong absence." Xichen shook his head and said firmly, "I will write to him and explain. He will understand, and while your presence is important to him, I am sure that he would rather be in full health." Meng Yao started to protest, but Xichen shook his head and firmly led the way back to Huaisang's quarters. Huaisang immediately threw his arms around Meng Yao and whined dramatically.
Yao Ge, you have to stay with me longer. There's so much that's new here, and so much for me to get used to. Can't you stay a few more nights?
Xichen raised his sleeve to cover the beginning of a laugh. He was fairly certain that Huaisang just wanted Meng Yao's company, and Meng Yao had mentioned in his letters that his younger brother was very fond of Meng Yao, and that Meng Yao was very good at managing Huaisang, though he spoiled him a bit. Meng Yao started to say, "Your brother needs me." Xichen cut him off, though he slipped his phrase into a pause so that he would not seem impolite.
"That sounds like an excellent idea. Huaisang should write to his brother that you need to stay here a bit longer to help him. I'm sure that between that and my letter, Meng Yao will understand."
Meng Yao looked between the two of them, uncertainty hinted at with his hesitation. Finally, he sighed and said, "If you insist." Xichen smiled, delighted.
"I believe we both do."
Huaisang was nodding enthusiastically. He launched himself to hug Xichen, familiar with him from Zichen's visits to Meng Yao, though those were less frequent than Xichen would have liked. He missed his best friend. He was surprised when Huaisang whispered in the middle of his expressive display of gratitude,
"Thank you. He needs to rest so his ribs stop hurting, but he won't listen."
Xichen took note that apparently Huaisang had noticed, even though Meng Yao clearly had not. Xichen knew that Meng Yao would have made sure to have something done about it if he had. He smiled at Huaisang and said,
"I'm going to steal Meng Yao away for a bit and have some tea and discuss matters. You should continue to settle in."
Chapter 3. Why? Meng Yao watched as Xichen wrote a letter and sent it on its way before beginning to prepare tea. "Why?" he asked softly. Xichen took a moment to consider this question. He answered honestly.
"It is my duty to make sure that all who visit here are looked after properly, and you are important to my dearest friend, so I would doubly so not wish to see you suffering."
Meng Yao did not respond. He just watched him, clearly trying to understand. Xichen asked,
"How were your ribs injured? Even with an old injury, it is helpful for me to understand its nature."
Meng Yao looked down, and then he said, voice uncomfortable, "I fell down a flight of stairs." Combined with the whispers from earlier and what Xichen knew of Meng Yao, he realized that this must be from the time that he had been kicked down the stairs at Koi Tower. Of course that was an uncomfortable topic, and Xichen would not pry into it further. He kept his tone intentionally light as he asked,
"May I inspect your ribs? Only with spiritual energy for now. I will not need to touch more than your wrist."
Meng Yao held out his arm, seeming somewhat defeated, and Xichen slowly fed a stream of spiritual energy into Meng Yao's wrist. He fixed a few small problems as he encountered them, thinking nothing of it. Meng Yao's golden core was small and weak, but well regulated and maintained, especially for someone who had received little training. It was clear that it was not strong enough to deal with more than small ills, though. Xichen was sure that with proper instruction, Meng Yao could easily strengthen his core. He would discuss that with Meng Yao later, though, when the other man was more comfortable with him. He could tell that Meng Yao was quite guarded, which did not surprise Xichen with the type of gossiping that had been following him. It would not surprise Xichen if there were very few people that Meng Yao had encountered in the cultivation world who had not looked down on him upon knowing his origins, and that seemed highly unfair. He found the damage readily enough. Old cracks in the ribs, mostly healed over, and swollen cartilage around the joints between the ribs and the sternum, shifting the ribs outwards. Of course Meng Yao was in pain. In fact, Xichen was stunned at how well Meng Yao had hidden it. He sent a soothing wave of spiritual energy through the area before withdrawing. Meng Yao was watching him, startled and uncertain, when he looked back up. After a minute, Meng Yao said tentatively, "It feels better. Thank you. I'm probably fine to travel now."
Xichen shook his head and said, "That was only an initial bit of helping. Some of the damage can be properly healed, but you should rest for several days. The trip and likely the change in altitude and pressure has made it worse. I have some teas that will help with the inflammation, and I will be pleased to send them with you, though I'm sure they also have them in Qinghe. But there is more that I can do before you must leave."